learning about the Holocaust. I'm Jewish, so I've frequently wondered what my ancestors went through during World War II. My Oma, which is the German term for grandmother, was a young girl during the Holocaust. She and her family ended up escaping the Nazis and surviving the war. For my project, I wanted to delve a little deeper into what exactly she went through to survive, and more specifically, how and why they escaped, who helped them, the kind of problems they faced, and what happened to those who didn't survive. My Oma was born and raised in Berlin, Germany. At some point in her childhood, when she was about 7 or 8, she and her family moved to Czechoslovakia to the city of Prague. When World War II began, it was crucial that they get out of Czechoslovakia because the Czechoslovakian Jews were being shipped off to Auschwitz, which is considered to be the worst concentration camp from World War II. When the Nazis started invading other countries, they started taking Jews jobs, homes, possessions, money, and even sending them to places like ghettos and concentration camps. As the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, it was very dangerous for them to continue living there. However, the process for escaping a Nazi-occupied country was complex. To start, you had to get an exit permit, which was pretty much the Nazis' permission for you to leave the country. My Oma's father and aunt went through 3 days of harsh interrogation with the Nazis before they were permitted to leave. After you got your permit, you only had 6 hours to get out of the country, or else they would have had to stay in Czechoslovakia. And finally, if you managed to get a permit and get out of the country in time, the Nazis would take all of your money and possessions before you left, so you had nothing. My Oma and her family originally wanted to go to Australia because they had friends there who could help them, and it was relatively safe for Jews there at the time. However, since so many Jews were immigrating to other countries, all the safe places for Jews were filling up with the Jewish immigrants. Australia would not let my family into the country. This was a huge problem for many other Jews trying to relocate to safe locations like Greece, Palestine, Spain, Portugal, or even other continents like Asia, Africa, South America, and Australia. Although these places did house many Jews during the war, thousands of Jews were turned away at the borders. Instead of going to Australia, my Oma and her family ended up taking a dangerous nighttime train ride through Germany to the coast, where they then took a boat to England. Although England was safer than Czechoslovakia, it wasn't an ideal place to be because it was still engaged in the war with Germany. The first major problem they faced in England was the worker's permit. The worker's permit was a law that said you couldn't have a job or get paid for your first year living in England. This was a huge problem because when they left Czechoslovakia, the Nazis took all of their money. There was no way they would be able to survive in England without a source of income. Luckily, they were in contact with a very wealthy British novelist who agreed to sponsor them. She was extremely generous and paid for their first year living in England and found them a place to live. However, many Jews were not able to find a sponsor and died because they had no money from starvation or homelessness. There were some organizations during the war who tried to help Jews struggling with no money and tried to find them a place to live or fund them. Unfortunately, still thousands of Jews died because they had no money. However, an even bigger problem that they faced in England was the Blitz. The Blitz was a series of strategic attacks on innocent British civilians by Germany. It began when Germany bombed a small British town, and England retaliated by bombing Berlin, Germany. This was a huge deal because Berlin had never been attacked before due to Germany's strong military. Germany retaliated by almost continually bombing England for about 6 months straight. The longest consecutive attack on England lasted for 57 days in a row. The Blitz was an awful time for all people of England. My Oma was only 7 or 8, and she recalls the time she spent hiding in bomb shelters late at night, hoping they would survive, as some of the worst experiences from the war. The Blitz was awful, and Germany ended up using almost 18,000 tons of bombs to kill over 18,000 men, 16,000 women, 5,000 innocent children, and 700 bodies that were so terribly charred by the fire that they were unidentifiable after their death.
Pause.
Yeah.
This is causes no effect on you. Technical difficulties. Nope, it's fine. I don't know why it kicked you out. We'll just get you back in.
It says could not connect to room 111.
This is not part of Lilo's speech. This is airplanes.
How many times did you have to practice this, Lilo, to perfect it?
Thousands. Yeah.
Okay.
Bodies.
Yes.
Identification.
And the bodies were so badly charred by the bombs that they were unidentifiable after their death. My Oma and her family were fortunate enough to escape Czechoslovakia in time and survive the war. However, millions and millions of Jews, including my Oma's grandparents, did not get out in time and died. On my Oma's father's side, Haman, her grandparents stayed in Czechoslovakia because her grandmother had a severe heart problem and the trip to England would probably have killed her. Since they stayed in Czechoslovakia, they eventually received word that they would be shipped to Auschwitz. Knowing that they would not survive and wishing to avoid the horrible things that lay in the concentration camp, they chose to die a dignified death and committed suicide by way of lethal injection to avoid going to Auschwitz. On my Oma's mother's side, her grandmother was eventually sent to a ghetto called Tarzan and then to Auschwitz. Millions of other Jews died in concentration camps like my Oma's grandparents, but they also died because of medical experiments, gas chambers, mass shootings, disease, malnutrition, unsanitary conditions, and even methods of torture designed to kill them by the Nazis. Before World War II, there was almost 9 million Jews living in Europe. The Nazis ended up killing 6 million of those Jews, which is 70% of the population. That's as if out of the 15 people in our classroom, 10 of us were to die if we were in World War II. Although some of my family members did die during the Holocaust, we were extremely fortunate that just my Oma survived. It's painful to remember the terrible things that we did in war, but it's important to remember the Holocaust and those who were affected.